Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is to our October Mentor Wisdom session in the Thrive Group. I'm so glad many of you I know will be joining us in this recorded version. So please do feel free to, pause at any moment, to hear all these juicy tidbits that I know Bonnie has saved up for us. In fact, before we went on the recording, she had one bit of advice as far as scheduling to share.
Yes.
But without further ado, let me introduce to you Bonnie Landry. And Bonnie, for those folks here who don't know you, I'm going to give the floor to you to tell us a little bit about who you are, and maybe just answer that one question. Why did you decide to do this crazy thing called homeschooling?
Right. That's a great question. So back in the day, so we started homeschooling in 1991. So I'm entering this year, my 32nd and last year of homeschooling. And that feels pretty weird, but we did it. It was awesome. I started homeschooling because I never heard of homeschooling. I didn't know it existed. It was already running in the States, but it wasn't something here in Canada that anyone knew anything about. And it wasn't until actually I had my a conversation with a woman as I was approaching my kindergarten year with my oldest daughter that she said, oh, well, I'm planning on homeschooling. And I thought, there's a name for it. So that was really interesting to sort of be part of those very early years. But ultimately, I wanted education to be different than what I had experienced. And so for me, really what that meant was that education would be non-coercive and that it would be beautiful, and my children would grow up with a true love of learning. Not the odd teacher who lit a spark on them or whatever, lit a spark under them, but that they could really appreciate the world around them and what life was all about via their actual real wholesome education, right? And so that just was very exciting to me to want to do that. So I started with my oldest daughter, and then we ended up, we had 6 more kids. So we have homeschooled everybody all the way through. The first 6 are graduated and doing adult things, university, marriage, children, jobs, all that stuff. My youngest is at home now and just entered her grade 12 year. So yeah. So, and then a few years ago, I started blogging a long time ago, maybe 12, 14 years ago, because I was speaking at conferences and things like that, because I discovered that moms really needed encouragement to be able to kind of let go and relax about homeschooling. And I wanted to create an environment where people could homeschool the way they imagined it to be. And that is what we were experiencing in our home, that it was a beautiful thing. Not that every moment of the day is beautiful. People are people, and people get in bad moods, including myself. So, but in general, it was a beautiful, wholesome experience. And then my kids did love to learn. So it really began as a ministry, and then that rolled into, at the beginning of the pandemic, that really rolled into my podcast, which started 2.5 years ago. So I'm really grateful, because I never in my wildest dreams would have done something like that. I like speaking to people in person, but now I just get this amazing experience
Right.
of
And
interacting.
again, blessings out of things that were tough. The whole idea of the pandemic, even just this whole community coming together, the ability for us, I would have never dreamed, that here I am on a Zoom call.
Exactly. Thank you, Natalie, for your comments, by the way. That was lovely.
Yeah,
it really pushed me, and I am such a boomer, and so the idea of like doing technical things would just be I can't. And my kids would say, you can do this, Mom, and I'm no, I can't. And then look, I did.
Yes, you did. Sweet.
Yeah.
So great. So one of the things, just let people know too, and I'll put the links to your website and your, anywhere you want to point us, so people can look at some of those, listen to your podcast and get that encouragement. But I love it's called Make Joy Normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
How'd you come up with that name?
That's a great question. We had we were at a camp. I plan a Catholic homeschool camp in our area. So we have a week-long camp. I hire a cook. We invite all the families. It's an amazing thing. It's been going for 20 years, and it's fabulous. And I can't remember what happened, but sometime, this is, 4 or 5 years ago, a friend of mine said, why is everybody, the kids were squabbling or something. People were being, were not being, getting along or something. I don't remember the circumstances. And this friend of mine said to me, what's going on with everybody today? Like, why is everybody just not getting along? And so I made a big sign up that just said, okay, everybody, just be normal. Right. And I thought, okay, well, depending on what you perceive as normal, for me, joy should be normal, right? And it doesn't mean it's there, but it is my default, right? It is my default. It's what I always hope for. So I think that what happened was, so that sort of became an ongoing joke. So when I started the podcast, I thought, it really is my goal to make joy the normal default for our people in our family lives. And we live in a very fragile society, right? People are fragile. And there's always going to be times in our life when we are fragile, that are appropriate to be fragile. But it shouldn't be every day of our life. We should always be striving towards joy. And so how can we do that better? And so that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things, if I have done these surveys of what do people want out of their homeschooling, joy is the number one. And I really think that comes hand in hand with this understanding. And I do think, as we are, speaking in a Catholic audience here, that we do have a special understanding of joy, that actually even in suffering, there's joy. And it is this ability to unite ourselves, realizing that everyone, as you say, fragile, are destined for heaven. Even those that get under our skin and bother us.
Yeah.
We're all destined. And so it's this ability that while we may be suffering, is to find joy in that.
I'm an adult convert, and I remember when I first became a Christian, and reading stories of the saints and whatnot, and thinking, I can't wrap my brain around this idea of joy in suffering. How can anyone have that as an expectation? That's not realistic, right? I hate suffering, and as I grew in my relationship with Christ, I would say I'm a pretty joyful person and always have been, but not when I'm suffering. But as my relationship with Christ grew, and I recognized that this suffering was something I could unite to him for the benefit of my own spiritual life and the spiritual life of so many others, that I can find joy in suffering, and I can feel rest in suffering, but that was a big learning curve, as a baby Christian, right? Because I was raised without any sense of Christianity.
You almost have to experience in some ways,
Yeah.
it textbook wise.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember around that time when I was really struggling with this idea, I had a miscarriage. I had my 3 daughters, and then I had a miscarriage, and I was so angry at God, and so wallowing in my own sorrow, and it's a time when we do feel sorrow. It's not, that's normal and healthy and good. Of course, loss is going to provoke sorrow, but we had I was angry, and I was angry for a long time. And then I had my 3 boys, and then I had another couple of miscarriages. So it was about 10 years later. And I remember just feeling, oppressive sadness, but not anger, and feeling like I can do this and God will carry me through it. And, and this is going to be hard, but God can bring good out of this. I know that. And then thinking, gee, I guess I've grown. Right. I guess in these last 10 years, I've grown, and it was good for me to know that. Right. Because we don't mark our growth. We mark our children's growth. We don't mark our own.
We don't mark our own. No, that's excellent. That's one of the milestones or things that we talk about here, is really, it's almost like these celebrations and really pausing to recognize that growth. But similar thing for me too as well. And it was really through the experience of having a miscarriage and actually going through that, feeling very united to St. Padre Pio, just feeling this overwhelming sense of messages and comfort in such a way of just saying, Paula, you're a portal to heaven for God. He's just using you as a way to bring more souls into heaven and rest in that. And the suffering itself too was this idea were for the souls of purgatory. And there were incredible deep feelings, I know, as I suffered through those miscarriages, of feeling very united to the souls in purgatory. And so again, it's the ability to really find joy in that.
Exactly.
And really it's about thinking of our lives in a way of contributive.
Yeah.
What am I contributing to this world? God put me here for a mission, to carry on his mission. And what is that contributive thing, that he's asking? And there's joy in being, I was made for this and I'm doing it.
I know. Ali, you had said you're a adult convert. Has your conversion been fairly recent?
No, let's see. About 18 years ago when I was in college.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. It's did you also convert from nothingness?
Vague Christian, very moral, very more like scientific. God is, there's probably a creator, but we don't have to necessarily follow any rules about him. And then,
the 10 suggestions.
my parents let me go to vacation Bible schools and things like that, just so that I would know about it, but we didn't necessarily follow it. Although I'm very glad, very thankful that I was raised with most Christian morals.
Yeah.
Just not necessarily God being the reason why.
Right. Yeah. That was similar to my experience. I had no Christianity at all in my life, but my parents were very sort of, really held the moral high ground, but I remember being a young adult and thinking that why, I mean, I think it's the right thing to do, but why? I don't really understand why. And so, the God piece of that puzzle, the God box of that puzzle, that was definitely.
I just kind of felt him calling me you need to figure this out, what you actually believe about me for yourself.
Yeah. So, what a grace.
My husband is too. He converted before we got engaged.
Wow.
Decided that he would. And so, because I had been you can come to mass with me. So he'd been coming with me most of the time,
Right.
And, but so he was the same, just kind of, well, we want you to decide for yourself what you believe. That's kind of how he was raised.
Yeah. It's an amazing
so has
thing.
that, do you feel, and I'm a revert to the faith itself. So in many ways, I was a child of the catechism, of laissez-faire catechism. And so it was just, there was no foundation. And so to be able to homeschool was actually part of my own faith journey, because I always was learning so much from my children's questions and from our ability to search for those answers. And in my spending time to deliberately choose what kind of materials or what journey we would be on that year with our kids. Would you say that that's had an influence as well, in terms of, for me, the only thing I never outsourced was religion, because it was the one discussion and the one heart that I wanted to get to know their heart and them to get to know my heart for the Lord. So did that ever have an influence in terms of-
because I was a single mother with my first daughter, right? And so she wasn't, she basically came into the church the same time as me. So she was baptized at 4 or whatever when after my husband and I got married. And then she started catechesis at 6 years old or something, and so I just took her to the classes. I mean, we were pretty ignorant. My husband was too, and I remember we had the Faith and Life books, and there's sort of a Baltimore Catechism question and answer style, right? And it said, "Why did God make me?" One of the first questions, "Why did God make me?" And I thought, why would they ask a child that? Isn't that a big question for theologians and all that? And then the turn the page and the answer was, God made me to know him, love him, and serve him in this life, so that I can be happy with him forever in the next life. And I thought, okay, why did no one ever tell me that? I had very poor RCIA. No one ever explained that to me, not as a child, not as an adult coming into the church. And so that was something that I thought, okay, we just need to bring our children along in their faith life and live it fully, and for us, that meant a lot of the lives of the saints, reading a lot of the lives of the saints, so that we could understand that everybody's on a journey. It's not like they just were born holy and they grew up holy and they went to heaven. It's just never happens that way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I just before we get, you and I could just keep going at this, but I would love the ladies that are here today to go ahead and pop in any questions. I did want to, I know Natalie, you put something in there where you say basically, cradle Catholics. So you've always wanted a homeschool. So these two things are like in your heart, but it's the social part. Okay. Especially because you're a military family. Yeah. And I imagine you've had to move, start over again. So hard. Any tips and I know we did a podcast on community. So talk a little bit about that, Bonnie. How can we help Natalie here with the social part?
Yeah, that's interesting because we had one of our families. So we had a really core group of homeschoolers here. We live rurally, very small town. Our church fits 100 people. Like we were the families of the church, and we crammed that place. Because we mostly had big families, and one of our families was a military family. And so they had moved every, 4 years or whatever, Canadian military, but they'd moved right across the country. And I asked her one time, asked the mom one time, she was a very solid mom. And I said, what's that like, uprooting your kids? Do you feel like that's hard on them? And that, does it create instability, and she said, no, I think the stability comes from the family. And the fact that we move every 4 years is just part of their normal life. Right. And even, the fact that we homeschool, there's no disruption in their schooling, right? Which was really, really great to hear. But they were also very proactive at getting involved in their communities, right? And so, entering a community, finding out if there's something in place, and if there's not something in place, hey, ladies, want to come over, want to have a visit, want to get the kids together, want to go on play dates, and very proactively doing that, right? And so I think that that's something that, for our community, there's a couple of us in my own community, that myself and another one of the dads, that we are really, front runners in terms of creating community. Now we're seeing younger people picking up that torch as, we're both in retirement stage of life. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Just, get an idea, do it. Right. And I think that, if you were moving on a fairly regular basis, that's something you would have to develop in yourself, right? Just to be able to kind of either dive into a community that exists already, or say, hey, let's get together, so that becomes your kids' normal, that we create community wherever we are, and that's such a beautiful gift. And also, as they get older, how old are your kids, Natalie?
I have one daughter who is 7, so we're in 7th grade. Yep.
Okay. So that's something that, like, I found as they got older into sort of preteen years and teen years, that it was so important to have them create friendships that weren't necessarily in their own community, right? So that they had people they could go visit, right? That's pretty exciting to go, even if they have to fly somewhere or drive somewhere, go stay a few days with another good Catholic family, that was really important. So we got a lot of that through going to conferences, which hasn't really been a thing for the last couple of years, but the in-person conference was so important to meet people, and being able to connect with other Catholic families in that way, so that they would have people to, and those are the kids our kids have gone off to college with, and gone on, overnight hikes with, and, had their adventures with. My son right now is in Australia, with a buddy that he met as a teenager. And, what a beautiful thing, right? And so the effort to make sure that could happen and they could make connections. We also didn't want our kids to think that our little Catholic homeschool community was some insular community that didn't exist anywhere else, right? It was a bubble that didn't exist, because we know that there's communities, all over the world like that now. So those were just, some of the places we put our energy, so that it helped. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel with the sickness, and I remember, Bonnie, you sharing, I think, with like a long term, and mine isn't like too serious of a thing. It's just kind of like with our journey and this lingering infection that I have made, like I had to take us out of co-op. Hard to commit because of the tiredness. And I know with Allie, we talk about it on our Monday group. And I'm just really like, Lord, like, what do I do? Because I feel like I'm always canceling because the time comes and I'm just hit with like so tired. So I feel like doing something like this has been really good, but then I missed it in person. So I'm just like, I think the only thing I can think of is just randomly going to parks when it works for us. So it's kind of like when I feel energy, like, let's go to park, we see people. So I don't know. I'm kind of, and I'd love to know your thoughts. If I should just, I'm trying to just like, wow, Lord, should I just accept, like, this is a season of, we can't just like, hey, come over, or like, unless my
Yeah. And I think you said it. It's kind of like you answered your question for yourself.
Yeah.
Anyways, Natalie. No, one thing is Natalie has been really instrumental in getting this smaller, tighter group that meets every Monday. And I think that you guys will eventually meet each other. And just like Bonnie said, I have lifelong friends through this unity of Catholic homeschooling families. And there's this family.
If somebody's a Catholic homeschooler, you know what they're about. So it's a really cool way to kind of filter what kind of people you're going to be with. And I mean, lots of personalities and lots of different ways of doing things, but you know what they believe at their core, right? And that's a beautiful thing to sort of have this, because even in the Protestant communities, there's not necessarily, you don't necessarily believe the same things, right? And so it's just a very different vibe. But we have, if you're a Catholic homeschooler, we know what you believe, we know what matters to you, right? And so wherever we go, we can find that, But in terms of being a season, Natalie, years ago, I thought this was a really beautiful thing. This woman that I met was a homeschooler, and she had been a homeschooler for a long time, and she lived way out in the country. They didn't have neighbors. They were working a farm. They didn't have time to get out, to go see people and whatnot. And she basically said, God will provide for us, right? And maybe it won't be till they go off to college or whatever that they actually sort of meet their lifelong friends. But in reality, that is when we meet our lifelong friends. Most of us don't have friends that we went to grade school with, right? And so, that God will get them through this, and, we can pray for friendships and we can pray for our situation, but ultimately it would be okay. If this is what God has given you right now, it would be okay, right? Yeah.
And it gets back to that whole idea of suffering. And it is, my heart goes out to you, Natalie, because I know you're a very social person, and there is nothing like being that personal one-on-one connection. But it's interesting. I mean, I even seize the moment. I think it really is kind of, you're going to have to go. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. The part is, it's a struggle, is to give yourself permission to say, my homeschooling is going to be so flexible because I don't have the health issues right now that we can be on a schedule of any kind. But that's great in the sense that today's real energy day. So this is the kind of day we need to go outside to the park. And we were talking before we hit the record. I went with my two youngest, actually, to a beautiful estate garden. And there were just people there just sitting on the bench, taking in the beauty, talking and appreciating. Somebody was talking to my son, sharing camera tips, just being with that connection. We just seized the moment. We didn't plan it ahead of time. We didn't do anything. We just like, let's go. Beautiful day. Let's just do this. And there's a beauty in that pick up and go with homeschooling.
Yeah. Paula, Jennifer has a question here, just scrolled up a little bit, that I think is really worth addressing. Can we go that direction?
Sure. Okay, so let's go.
So
not every day yet. So again, Jennifer, thank you. You were talking about how you've always wanted a homeschool, thought the local parish school was always better. Then came the pandemic and answered the call to homeschool. Love it. You're in year 3. Not every day is beautiful, but the moments of joy, flexibility keep us going. I'd love to hear your perspective. Did you do more of a one-to-one style of homeschooling or more one-room schoolhouse model? So,
right. This is such a good question. So I really felt like our day, in a sense, was sort of split into two, because I think some subjects really lend themselves really well to one-on-one, and some subjects really lend themselves really well to family style learning, right? So essentially that's what I did. So we had a very sort of basically the entire time that I've been homeschooling. So it's a plan that has worked really well for our family. We gather at breakfast, I read, we discuss, it's very Socratic, I just spend time reading to my kids, and then we're looking things up in the encyclopedia and we're chatting about whatever I'm reading. So I'm usually reading a book, some sort of information book, for a couple of minutes, and then a novel. And that's our time we spend together. So it might take 20 minutes, it might take an hour and a half some days, because I'm just allowing it to unfold as it's meant to be. And with the little ones, get up and play with the toys in the room or whatever, that's okay. And then after breakfast, I would sit down and do one-on-one with them. For myself, that was usually math and language arts, until they really grabbed math and were able to be independent on that. I find that language arts is because it's more, artsy. It was something that I would basically worked with them and just moved up the ladder in terms of skill and accomplishment in what they were able to do. So it starts off something very, very simple. You're doing dictation together, you're learning your letters, you're learning how penmanship, you're learning, how the letters go together to create words, you're learning spelling, you're learning grammar, punctuation, all of that. And that just very gradually moves into, okay, how do we write a paragraph? How do we write a poem? How do we write an essay eventually, right? And so, the natural transition of that one-on-one work, but I kept it very short. 5 to 10 minutes max for dictation, language arts, 5 to 10 minutes max for math. And so I felt like it was a really, really functional method for me and my family, because we got all that lovely family time together, and then the one-on-one time was just short and snappy, and and then we gathered again at lunchtime and read together as well. So we'd sort of repeat, and then we had our afternoons free in general. The odd time when I had high schoolers, it might be something I have to work on them with, study guide or an essay or something we do in the afternoon, but in general, we sort of worked until lunchtime and then had the day.
So a little bit of a combination of one-on-one and one-room schoolroom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there subjects? So, and I know that people say this all the time. You started to address that. What happens with the little ones and nap time? And how do you do toddlers and teens?
Yeah, that is, challenging for sure when you start sort of having teenagers and you still have babies in the house. Babies in ball gowns was how we used to refer to that. So I found that I just let my babies be on me all the time. But what I created was a space that that I put those little hooks and eyes on doors I didn't want my toddlers going into, and baby gates up and that sort of thing, so that they were corralled in a space with me so that I could have eyes on them at all times. So for us, we had a big sort of eat-in kitchen and a table in there. That's where we did our schoolwork and I read to the kids and whatnot. And it was corralled off. So there was baby gates across the, entry to the stairs. There was hooks and eyes so that kids had lots of room to move around. They had baskets of toys and whatnot in there. I had Play-Doh. My kids played Play-Doh and, drew and stuff like that while I was reading to them. But I always knew where they were. It's when the toddlers start to wander away that becomes a problem, right? Because you don't know where they are. Oh, I got to jump up and whatever. And so I think it becomes really important to manage our environment in such a way that that we can live our life in a kind of a more relaxed manner, right? And I mean, you do get emergencies, like somebody all of a sudden, they're potty training or whatever, gotta go right now. But then your kids know it's whether it's a real emergency or just like, oh no, where did that toddler go, right? So that was really important in terms of just being able to create an environment that was relaxing for me, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome that you bring up the environment. And very often I do find, especially new homeschoolers, tend to set up a very school-like schoolroom type environment. And it just may not be conducive to the basic age levels that you're working with at that point. And just being aware of even just lighting and are you going to just constantly be saying, no, don't touch that, don't touch that.
Yeah. Well, I also had a policy that, like, I just had a basket with snacks in it, and they could just help themselves. So that way I'm not saying, okay, I have to stop and get you food every 5 minutes. There's a variety of snacks in the basket, help yourself. And that way I could proceed and not feel like I was going to be interrupted. And you are interrupted, right? We all know when we have little kids, any job that is going to take 10 minutes is going to take you an hour. And that's, we just have to be realistic about that, right? So if you potentially say you do, 20 minutes of sit down work with each of your kids, and you have 4 kids that you're doing that with, probably between the, 5-10 minutes, 20 minutes you're doing with each kid, you kind of get up and get people settled and whatever, we can expect that, right? We're not going to say, okay, it's going to take an hour and a half to do sit down work with these kids. Yeah, it's going to take an hour and a half, but there's probably going to be things that happen in between that you think, oh, okay, so I'm going to just jump up and do this for a minute, and I'll work with you in a couple of minutes. I just need to take so-and-so to the bathroom or change a diaper or whatever, right? Or deal with a screaming meltdown or whatever. There's just so many variables in life.
There are. And that's all part of the journey. I think it is one of the things, and I think I'm going to get to Allie's question here, because it kind of leads into this whole idea of what our expectations, what are the expectations we're setting? So Allie says, when you mentioned in the beginning that you wanted your children's education to be non-coercive, okay, how did you feel you achieved this? And do you still have requirements for your kids?
Yeah. So that, of course, is going to look different with little kids than it is with older kids, but we did achieve non-coercive education. It was not something I was going to, I was never going to make education a bargaining chip. I was never going to give stickers and stars. I was never going to say you have to get this done or you can't X. That just wasn't going to be part of the program. And so, of course, you have to make that, you as a mother have to approach that joyfully, right? And that starts with something as simple as, when you're going to, you read to your children, that you make this a joyful thing, that you create a rich environment so that education is something you're immersing yourselves in all the time. And you create situations of wonder every day. When you're cooking, you talk about what you're doing. You talk about when you see bugs out in the yard, you just create an environment that fosters the wonder that children just naturally have, and don't do things that is going to squelch it, right? So did we do things? Yeah, I had certain things that I did, because I think I rarely got pushback, because it was an enjoyable thing, right? Sitting down and reading a novel together and talking about it was an enjoyable thing. Sitting around and doing dictation, it was really important to me that was relational. Okay. Now was there the odd day where somebody was in a bad mood or didn't sleep well or whatever, and just, threw their pencil across the room? Sure. Yeah, sure. That happened. And my response to that would be, you know what, you're having a really hard day. How about we just snuggle instead of doing dictation? Right? I was not going to make it the mountain I was going to die on. Right? Because I know that that's not going to be healthy in terms of education or in terms of the relationship with my child. And we can think, okay, well, they would take advantage of that. They would have a little hissy fit every day so they don't have to do their work, right? But that isn't what happens. When we're, as adults, and children, I think, are more malleable in this way than we are, when children are adults, as adults, if we have a big hissy fit about something, our husband comes home from work and the house is a mess, and he walks in the door and we've had a really bad day, and we have a big hissy fit, and he says, go to your room, right? I'm so sick of this. I walk home from work and you rant at me. No, thank you. Right. So just go away, go to your room, go for a walk. I don't want to be around you. Right. Or he's going to punish. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but he's going to punish us in some way. Okay. You're not going to get your gold star. Okay. It's ludicrous. Right. And we would be angry now, and the anger might last for days. If it was me, it would, I might be angry for days over something like that because it's so ridiculous and so undignified, right? He's not treating me with dignity at all. I'm not treating him with dignity by having a hissy fit, but sometimes it happens. Right? So what if, same scenario, the husband walked in and he could see you had a bad day and he gave you a big hug and he said, you know what, sweetheart, I can see you had a really hard day. What can I do for you? Right? What would help you get through these next few minutes? Can I make dinner? Would you like to go for a walk by yourself? Can I take the kids out of the house? What would matter most to you? Right? He just loves us, right? He just loves and is tender with us, right? We don't think the next day, oh, I loved him making dinner last night, I'm going to have a hissy fit so that he makes dinner again, right? We don't think that way. We actually work harder so when people are tender to us, we actually want to be more for them the next time, right? And I saw this over and over again in my own life, that if my kids, they're struggling with their math and they're getting frustrated and the tears are welling up, even, it doesn't matter if they were 6 or 16. If I say, you know what, sweetheart, this is really frustrating right now. Let's just back away from this. Let's go outside. Let's go for a walk or something. Let's have a snuggle. Let's go read a story. That is a guarantee the next day they would come back and, okay, you know what, I think what's frustrating me about this is that I feel like I should know this because I've been working on it for a long time, or I knew this yesterday, whatever the reason is, or I think I was just tired or hungry or whatever. Sometimes we don't even know the reason, it doesn't matter, but they come back to it with a fresh heart, right? And so we get so much more cooperation when we just love them through their challenges, the same way that we would want to be loved through our down times. And, that has played out in remarkable ways, with my adult children, when they're struggling with something, even if it's something personal between, me and them, or, them and their dad, or them, siblings as each other, that what they know is they can come to me. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to fault them. I'm not going to get mad at them. I'm just going to say, what can I do? Can I be helpful? Or do you just want my prayers? What would be the best way I can support you through this, right? And it's something that they know I will follow through with because it's what they've experienced since they were tiny little kids, right? So do I have expectations? Yeah. And most of the time they were cooperative. Most of the time they just did what I asked them to do because they knew if they were having a bad day, or even say it was a sunshiny morning, it was spring and they hadn't, been outside for a while. If they said, oh, I really want to go out and, ride my bike in the driveway, I would say, you know what, I'm okay with that. Why don't you just go have a half an hour ride and we'll come back to it in a few minutes, right? And they would cooperate because they knew I was going to be reasonable and generous, right, with them. And so, where was I going with that? So cooperation happens. So as they get older, okay, so we have a situation, okay, maybe my 16-year-old doesn't want to write an essay for me. Right. I had one daughter who I said, listen, you're not really doing writing with me. We talk about it and we say we're going to do it, but we always get squeezed out. You want to go, bake a cake or sew a dress or whatever. She had lots of interests, but, writing was not one of them. So, you're 16. If I can't in good conscience write that you did English, grade 11 English on your transcript, if you ever decide to go to college, well, I'm not going to college. Okay, well, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But if you do, I don't want that door closed for you. So what are we going to do about this? Well, I don't like writing. Okay, well, would you like to choose your own program? Right? I can give you some links. You can research it yourself, decide what you want to do. And just get your own program. No, I want to try 1 more year with you. And I said, okay. So we tried. She wasn't cooperative again, but I wouldn't make it a fighting point, right? But I did at some point say to her, okay, listen, so we've gone through another 6 months. You haven't done any writing with me. I'm not going to fight you about this. I'm just not interested. However, I won't write it on your transcript either. I'm not going to falsify information. That's not fair to anybody, you or a college that you're applying to. So if you're not going to do writing, I wanted it in writing that we've made this decision, that you aren't going to do English with me, and that 3 years from now when you apply to college, that we've actually discussed this. You've decided if I decide to go to college, I'm going to do some writing course before I go, so that I make sure I have the requirements needed. So it never came to that. She said, okay, fine, I'll just choose my own course. And she did, and she followed through with it. And she chose the toughest English course possible out there. She did a good job of it, which was weird, but she did it, and she did it on her own. But it was just one of those things that I just had to be upfront with her, is that I'm not going to say you did it when you didn't. And if she had said, I don't care about a transcript, I'm not interested in college, as long as I've been fully forthcoming with her, you know what? Okay, fair enough. You will need to do that, though. You'll have to make that up if you decide in the future to go to college, right? Do you need it to get a job at the local grocery store? Sometimes I'm patient, not always. But it was an area of my life that I felt very confident in, that I'm not going to make education a fighting point. So we have to go into that eyes wide open, that it may not turn out the way we had hoped. They may have to do things as adults. And the thing is, sometimes they have to anyways, right? Like sometimes they just completely switch gears. You think, okay, we're just going to do a course of general studies. And all of a sudden, grade 12, they're thinking, I want to be an engineer. I want to be a biologist. I need all those sciences. Why didn't I do all those sciences that I thought I would need? Or I want to go into med school. Yeah, you can do that. Let's take a year, get all your sciences, right? Or let's do some AP science or whatever. We have that available to us. Education's never static, right? A person could be 40 and decide they want to go into med school, right? So we have to keep that perspective that that education is, children learn best in an environment of love, and love needs to be the foundation upon which we build, right?
Yeah. I love that you love them beyond their behavior, which is so great. It is. It's something, like you said, we all long for. We have the Father's love in that way. He loves us beyond our behaviors.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want to, again, so beautiful, because you have to understand, again, what you're saying is very radical. It is.
I know. And I think that's why it became a ministry, because it is radical, right?
It is. We have been told that, you're supposed to do certain subjects at certain ages, and you just got to, kowtow to the authorities or the people that are experts in education. And I think it's a breath of fresh air for people to experience, your philosophy about it and how it played out in your family.
Yeah. And they did accomplish all those things. They all went to university, like except the youngest, who's still at home. So, they all done whatever they wanted to do. There was no doors closed in their face. Because they did accomplish those things, because it was an ongoing conversation, and around, say, maybe a grade 9 or whatever, I would say, okay, listen, we need to start developing a transcript. Up to that point, I kept records for sure, because I don't ever want somebody coming to me and saying, prove what you've done, right? I felt, for my own peace of mind, I need to keep records. But, now I want to start a transcript for you for high school. And so what do you want that to look like? You need a certain amount of electives, you need your core courses. So it was a discussion, and they were very, very involved in the choosing of their own courses, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Hallie's saying she's glad this is recorded. Yes. And I hope people will go back to listen to this, because it's so much. It's true. We had a conversation recently about just grades and what do you do? And I think that we stress too many times, the family stress the K to 8.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What records do I keep? What do I do? What do we didn't cover this. We didn't do that. And the reality of it is that really it's not until you're getting closer to 9th high school years, and only because you're developing a transcript. And even that is so loose and so flexible.
And it's loose in the school system, right? Like what constitutes an English course or a math course will vary massively from high school to high school. And also they might offer 3 different math options that you can do in grade 11, or 3 different English options. You could do British literature, you could do creative writing, you could do whatever, as long as you're basically getting the literature and the writing component in, what that looks like is very fluid, Very
fluid. Yeah. And so that's where the children's interests come into play. But I think one of the keys you said, Bonnie, and I'd like to just explore that a little bit, is you were very confident in that. How did that come about? that you had this confidence in conviction in terms of the kind of education for your children, because it's the confident thing. We're always second guessing ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. Let's go back to the suffering question for a moment. So when I was young, well, first of all, I mean, right back to my parents. My parents were wonderful people. They're very passionate. I do not have the same passions as my parents, but I was passionate. And both my brothers are very passionate people as well. We've all gone very different directions in our lives, but just sharing that passion and tenderness, my parents were great role models for me. They were passionate and they were tender with us. It was very rare that we ever got punished for something. They would talk to us, right? They would just talk to us. And, like that really hurt us that you stayed out late. We expected you home at 11 and you rolled in at 3 a.m. That causes us a lot of worry. We need to talk about what that's going to be in the future, because this can't work, right? That kind of attitude towards us, right? It was very powerful. So, I mean, I think there's that, but the other thing too is that, as a young person, I suffered deeply. And I was in a relationship at 16. It was abusive. I married him when I was 20 because it was a way of getting out of my own guilt. I thought that somehow that would change my experience and it wouldn't be abuse anymore. It would be something different. I don't know what. Of course, that never worked. And I had a lot to work through. I left the marriage when I was 23, when my daughter was born, because I was not going to put her through what I had been through. And having her I just became a lion, and I thought, I will do anything for you to protect you from what I've been through. Right. And I didn't homeschool because I was trying to keep her out of the system, or, that was my whole educational paradigm was completely different than that. It wasn't a protective thing. But in terms of being her advocate, like with a doctor or a dentist or whatever, this fire just burned in me to make sure that my kids were never going to go through what I went through. Right. Yeah. And I mean, as I grew as a person and, grew to have older kids go through things, and sometimes it's hard, and you can't actually control everything, so sometimes they go through hard things. Fortunately, I've never had any of my kids go through anything like that, but that doesn't mean they didn't go through hard things. I've had several kids who've had quite severe anxiety, and, phases of different things that they've gone through, health wise or mental health wise or whatever. And they've all, they've come through them and we've supported them and all of that. But yeah, so it just lit a fire under me that couldn't, and I thought, I don't care what anyone thinks. That's really key. And I'm sure you are aware of this, Paula, that you just can't care what other people think. And I thought, early on, I thought, there is no way I'm going to explain myself to anybody, right? I'm just going to, if somebody doesn't agree with me, all I can say to them, like my parents or my, and people didn't, I mean, we were early homeschoolers. I would just say, I respect your choices and I'd like you to respect mine. End of conversation. And if I was around people that were toxic, I just didn't be around them, and I went through a period with my mom that I said, listen, Mom, I just can't be around this. Right. So if you're not okay with it, you just won't see me. And I wasn't threatening her. I was just being matter of fact about the whole thing. Like, I just need you to respect the decision I made and not undermine me. Right. You raised your kids. I'm raising mine differently. Just be okay with that. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that we actually pause to consider, okay, if somebody says to me, well, why are you doing that? Or somebody undermines me, have phrases that you use in your back pocket that you can say, no, I need you to respect my choices. You don't have to agree with me. We can never expect people to agree with us, right? That's I think many people get into that difficulty where they think, I want my family to support what I'm doing. That's a way too big of an expectation. I want my family to be respectful of what I'm doing. That's a reasonable expectation, right? Right. So, yeah.
It's also a matter of, it really does boil down to pride, in the sense of, well, I think I know what's best. And realistically, again, it's a decision. It is a choice. And like you said, there isn't this magical little wand and everything.
Yeah.
This is the path, and it does not negate the fact that there is truth, and truth exists in a person, and that person is Jesus Christ, so that's different from the idea that we still have to make choices, because I truly believe that God in his goodwill takes those intentions and brings them good out of that.
Absolutely.
But we are still imperfect beings, but we still have to make choices, and we do in terms of how we're raising our children.
And for every choice we make, there's another choice we gave up, right? And so we just have to kind of be okay with that, right? My another thing that I think is important to sort of note on this topic is that the grace of discernment goes to the parents, not to the grandparents, not to the neighbors, not to the aunts and uncles, right? And so that's something we can use. Are you laughing at me? That's something that we can use, even like, so when that's something that somebody said early on to me when my kids started dating and, entering into relationships, is that, my daughter had come to me. This is an aside, but my daughter had come to me, a man quite a lot older than her, who she did end up marrying. She came to me and said, "What do you guys think?" Right? We loved the guy, wonderful guy, but very, he was our age, right? And so we thought, wow, okay, this is a big deal. Okay, what does God say about age difference? Nothing. But how do I feel about this? Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, but and somebody said to my dearest friend said, the grace, you can pray for her, you can guide her, but the grace of discernment about her future spouse actually goes to her, right? And the grace of discernment for us as parents goes to us. And so what a beautiful thing to be able to say to our family, if they are annoyed, the grace of discernment comes from God to me. And, maybe I'm making mistakes, and maybe God's going to have to fill in with lots of grace. I don't know. But the grace of discernment actually comes to me and my husband, right? And, if they're faithful people, they can't really argue with that.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And
again, it's difficult. There are situations where people don't understand that.
That's brilliant. Yes.
That's the realization, is that, they do, especially grandparents are like, but we have their best interest at heart, and we're so much older. We've been through this. We know what's best. And, it's interesting because it's a lot of times it's a matter of the grace of just, as you said, letting go, say the statement and just end the conversation.
And here's a cool thing.
Discussion. This is a choice.
Oh,
love you very much. I didn't hear about but this
opinion's not welcome. Interestingly, so now we just found out we are expecting our 9th grandbaby. So in a very short period of time, we're having all these grandbabies. Oldest is 6. And so 3 of our daughters are married and having kids. And by the way, they're all homeschooling, which I think is very cool, because it was not something I ever sort of thought, I just can't, I'm not going to go down that road. You have to figure it out for yourself. Right. But a beautiful thing that they made that decision. But from a grandma perspective, I think so. It's a beautiful testimony. But from a grandma perspective, you do look at their life and you think, I wouldn't do it that way. But you know what? You have to keep your mouth shut. It's the only option, right?
Yes.
You have to let them figure it out. And so my daughters know they can come to me for advice, but they know I won't give it unless they ask.
Yeah.
Right. And I made that very clear. And so, but we have to give them the same respect that I expected from my parents. Right. And, and that can be difficult, but you have to really be, approach that, thoughtfully, because, we don't want to be our parents.
Well, it's a natural thing. We want to definitely somehow separate ourselves from them, and take the good, but we want to be our own self. And in our, very sometimes immature way of thinking through that, it's not, doesn't necessitate us doing things so differently. Well, I love how Jennifer said she's been asked by other family members to school their kids.
because you're so patient, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, do you get that? Because you're so patient. No, I'm actually not. My kids will tell you I'm not patient.
Well, I love the one that people are like, oh, I could never do that. Just
I'm not
me.
patient enough. Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, no, I am no,
Yes.
no poster
The school
child.
of love will teach you patience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I know, Ruth, don't want to put you on the spot. You can put anything in there, but you came in to the conversation. Do you have any questions? Just pop them in the chat if you have anything you wanted to ask in particular. We're reaching the top of the hour here, which, Bonnie, my gosh, we're gonna have you come back again. Maybe in the spring we'll do this.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Ruth Falgiano, that sounds like a good Italian name. You missed the part where I'm going to Italy, so on Thursday. So
great. Okay, no questions. Glad you got here. Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah.
Listen to the beginning, the recording. Yes, Italian hubby.
Nice.
So great. Well, I want anybody else, anything else? I mean, Allie, Jennifer, you guys, thank you for showing up and coming.
Yeah.
Any other questions you have for Bonnie before we wind this up? I think we're just a thumbs up would be great for good. Oh, go, Allie.
I just popped it in the chat there. You talked about reading the lives of the saints. I didn't know if you had
I didn't see that. Okay.
Recommendations or
recommendations for reading?
I feel like I still
maybe you didn't hit the hit.
Oh gosh, I keeps going to Jennifer for some reason. I didn't like I put a message to Jennifer.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I was looking and it said everyone, but somehow it got back to Jennifer. So
great.
Yeah, there's a beautiful series of children's kind of early novels by a writer whose name is Mary Fabian Windiat. She's actually a Canadian author, writing in the late 40s, early 50s, and a series of 20 books, each one on a different saint. And honestly, my husband and I both felt that they were the best catechesis we ever got, right, alongside our kids. And just so beautifully entering into the life of the saint, often as a child, and some of their experiences are often through the eyes of a child. And they were absolutely stellar books. Also, Ignatius Press puts out some.
So Tan
Mary Fabian.
Mary
Windiat. Yeah, Windiat is Weandeatt.
I think it's Windeatt.
Is it? Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yes, and
yep, there she is. Thank you, Ruth.
Beautiful, thank you.
I'll put the
and
link.
Just stellar books. And then there's there's a bunch
vision books.
Vision books. That's I knew they had a name, and they're sort of young adult fiction. Some of them were good. They didn't jazz us as much as
they're different authors.
Yeah, as Mary Fabian Windiat's books did. But there was some that were really good. There's some kind of cool graphic novels. I don't read graphic novels to my kids. I hate reading graphic novels type books or Tintin or all those. I really don't like the reading in frames. So I just said, if you want to read those books, you're on your own because I'm not going to read those. But there's some really cool graphic novels on saints' lives. Right. We have a couple. I think one is St. Clare and St. Francis or something like that. Beautiful books, but also Tommy Di Paola, that his books are stellar. So he's got the Holy Twins and Mary, the Mother of God. There are all kinds of saints books.
Some of those saints books were out of print, and now Ignatius is scooping up a few.
I know. I love that. Best book, not a saints book, but best book. One of my favorite childhood books at all is called Clown of God by Tommy Di Paola. Yes. And then there's a really good book guide online. A woman who's a Catholic homeschooling mom who's I believe got her degree in literature or something. Anyway, she's amazing. It's called what is it? Good Books for Catholic Kids. Oh. And she has lists like good books for boys, good books for saints books for kids. Then she's gone into sort of adult books, and her write-ups are really good. And she's just very, very lucid in the way she describes a book, and really makes you want to read it or not read it for that matter. But her book lists are really, really well done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Same thing with the Daughters of St. Paul have
Mhm.
their Encounter the Saints series. And again, different authors, but some of them are better than others. And they're
Yeah.
really look for those as well. They're just, what's nice is you can hit them at different levels.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because the Encounter of the Saints are really for a little bit younger, and the Vision books are a little bit older.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Did
it's
you-
nice to have a variety.
Do you guys, are the Father Lavasic books still around?
The
Little,
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean,
we
those,
have like a
Yes.
stack this wide of Father
Yes.
Lavasic, and our kids loved them.
yes,
Yeah.
those are the St. Joseph picture books. They're
Yes. Oh,
And oh my
yeah.
gosh, we called those, and it was cute because I remember our sister say, you guys, just your children are so well behaved in church, and we call them the church books, but they would each bring, I mean, all of them.
We
In
have a few
fact,
of them.
his book on the
Beautiful.
Guide to Confession is one of the best examinations of, conscience for a
Yeah,
child.
for a
Just the way
child.
he phrases it and asks the question, it's such a beautiful introductory. It's
An
well-
aside, great aside, Father Lavasic has some adult books as well. One
Yes,
of them is called The Hidden Power of Kindness,
right.
and it is amazing. It's a life-changing book.
It is.
Yeah. So,
Father
and
Lavasic, I admit that the person who owns Catholic Book Publishing, his father knew him, and he was baptized by Father Lavasic. So,
Oh,
and Catholic Book Publishing are the ones
Yeah.
that do all his pretty all those sweet little picture books. So it's just kind of cool to think that the publisher was baptized.
oh, that's amazing. He must be a saint. He's got to be, because just the love and tenderness that
Yes.
oozes from his books is just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, he
Yeah.
also has one on just so many, and that's Sophia Press also does those.
Yeah.
Well, and so I'll put a bunch of these links.
Awesome. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's awesome. So great. Well,
Are we
Bonnie,
out of time?
we are, but any final thing that you want to leave us with? Because as you said, you've got this ministry. I'll put the links.
Mhm.
You send me email, whatever things you want me to link up
Sure.
here. But you have this calling to encourage moms. What do you want to leave us with today?
Well, I would say mostly that I will pray for you while we're on our pilgrimage. All the holy sites. I have a little book. Where is it? I have a little black
Yay.
book that is about this big. I carry all my prayer intentions with it, and it will be, your community. I'll add to my prayer intentions, and so know that you're held up in prayer, and know that, us older moms, hold younger moms up in prayer, all the time. And that's probably our number one thing. I'll be releasing podcast episodes. They've been pre-recorded, so there's a whole bunch being released while I'm gone. So, the encouragement will keep going.
Yay.
And I'll be on Instagram. If you want to follow along on our trip, I'm on Instagram, Make Joy Normal.
Sweet. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You travel vicariously. Although trying to get off the social media, because, and I see that even in our community, moms are like, how do I self-control and not just spend, before you know it, 20 minutes scrolling through. But then it's a blessing too, because my friend Charbel, who runs Perusia, did a whole thing on the Holy Land. So it was like every step of the way I saw his journey on the Holy Land, and it was just so beautiful. So
it does give us an opportunity. I think social media gives us an opportunity to practice self-control. So however that starts for us, where we set a timer, or we shut our phone off for a period of time or whatever. But self-control is really what it's all about. And in the spiritual life, we're just learning to control all that which we don't want ourselves to be as we grow closer to God, right? So we can look at social media that way too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a gift. You're such a gift to us. Thank you so
you.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Got on the camera and you got, yourself acclimated to the tech part. So great. Well, Bonnie, we'll have you again.
So welcome, Ruth.
Bottom of our heart. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
God bless you all.
Bye. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Bye.
Thanks, Paula.